Hello everyone, it's time to learn who is behind QAnon, the cult classic. Cult classic? That's not what it is. It's people thinking that, a mysterious figure called Q was gonna usher in the awakening of the people and Donald Trump was like the savior and stuff. It's really weird. I made some videos on that topic. I'll put them below in the description box. But there's an article from the New York Times about who was behind that. So let's have a read. Who is behind QAnon? Linguistic detective find fingerprints. Using machine learning, separate teams of computer scientists identified the same two men as likely authors of messages that fueled the viral movement. Open your eyes, the online post began, claiming many in our government worship Satan. That warning, published on a freewheeling online message board in October 2017, was the beginning of the movement known as QAnon. Paul Feuber was its first apostle. The outlandish claim made perfect sense to Mr. Feuber, a South African software developer and tech journalist long fascinated with American politics and conspiracy theories, he said in an interview. He still clung to Pizzagate, the debunked online lie that liberal Satanists were trafficking from a Washington restaurant, a pizza restaurant, from its basement specifically. He was also among the few who understood an obscure reference in the message to Operation Mockingbird, an alleged CIA scheme to manipulate the news media. As the stream of messages, most signed only Q, grew into a sprawling conspiracy theory, the mystery surrounding their authorship became a central fascination of its followers. Who was the anonymous Q? Now, two teams of forensic linguists say their analysis of the Q text show that Mr. Feuber, one of the first online commentators to call attention to the earliest messages, actually played the lead role in writing them. Sleuths hunting for the writer behind Q have increasingly overlooked Mr. Feuber and focused their speculation on another QAnon booster, Ron Watkins, who operated a website where the Q messages began appearing in 2018 and is now running for Congress in Arizona. What a world. Wait, do I know Ron Watkins? Who? I don't know who that is. Mr. Watkins appears to have taken over from Mr. Feuber at the beginning of 2018. Both deny writing as Q. The studies provide the first empirical evidence of who invented the toxic QAnon myth, and the scientists who conducted the studies said they hoped that unmasking the creators might weaken its hold over QAnon followers. Some polls indicate that millions of people still believe that Q is a top military insider whose messages have revealed that former President Trump will save the world from a cabal of deep state Democratic pedophiles. QAnon has been linked to scores of violent incidents. Many of the attackers who stormed the Capitol last year were adherents, and the FBI has labeled the movement as a potential terrorist threat. Watkins is one of the main subjects interviewed in the HBO QAnon documentary. He and his wacko father. Oh shit, it's all coming together! I'm connecting the dots. The forensic, but they together run 8chan. Oh, wonderful people then. The forensic analyses have not been previously reported. Two prominent experts in such linguistic detective work who reviewed the findings for the Times called the conclusions credible and persuasive. In a telephone interview from his former home near Johannesburg, Mr. Feuber, 55, did not dispute that Q's writing resembled his own. Instead, he claimed that Q's post had influenced him so deeply that they altered his prose. Sure, buddy. I just really liked the way he wrote, so now I write like him? ? Q's messages took all over our lives, literally, Mr. Feuber said. We all started talking like him. Linguistic experts said that was implausible, and the scientists who conducted the studies noted that their analyses include tweets by Mr. Feuber from the first days Q emerged. Mr. Watkins in a telephone interview said, I am not Q, but he also praised the posts. Quote, there is probably more good stuff than bad, he said, listing as examples, quote, fighting for the safety of the country and for the safety of the children of the country, end quote. His campaign signs in the Republican primary refer to the online name he uses in QAnon circles, Code Monkey Z, and he acknowledges that much of the initial support for his campaign came from the movement. Relying mainly on small donors, Mr. Watkins, 34, trails the primary's frontrunner in fundraising. Two Republicans who have expressed support for QAnon were elected in 2020, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia and Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado. Wonderful individuals, both of them. Like, how wild is that like two representatives in like US politics are like, yep, QAnon is real, brother. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene was like, said on Facebook that she didn't think that the California forest fires were just like regular forest fires, but that they were caused by Jewish space lasers to like carve a path for railways. So, you know, definitely reasonable people. Where is John Podesta? Where's John Podesta? Did one or both escape the country and was let out? Where is Bo? Where was Bo yesterday? What is the difference between commercial and private regards security clearance for departure? And then Paul, on 2 years later, questions the media should be asking. What is Tehran's real background? Why did he travel to both North Korea and Pakistan recently? How did he get hold of so many restricted weapons? Why does his manifesto not ring true for a real HN denizen? Jewish space laser. Of course, it all makes sense. Yeah, the most obvious explanation. Some of the more extreme stories they weave about the fates of these stolen children draw a direct parallel to anti-Semitic blood libel. Yep. Yeah, they do. Like, it's not a real conspiracy theory unless at the core of it, there isn't anti-Semitism. It's always... all conspiracy theories, like all proper conspiracy theories, will always come back to it's the Jews. Always. And of course they're wrong because it's anti-Semitic as fuck. But always, every single one, somehow, they always come back to it. Computer scientists use machine learning to compare subtle patterns in texts that a casual reader could not detect. QAnon believers attribute this 2017 message to an anonymous military insider known as Q. Paul Ferber wrote this tweet after a mass shooting in New Zealand. Oh, that one. Scientists who studied the Q post say Mr. Ferber played a leading role in writing the earliest formative messages. The scientists say that in 2018, a collaborator took control of the writing as Q, Ron Watkins. This message from Q appeared in 2019, and Mr. Watkins wrote this tweet shortly after the 2020 election. Let's see. On the left. Reading the comments on these tweets further demonstrates the seriousness of media brainwashing in our country, whereby statements are considered fact without the need to provide proof. Groupthink. Control of the narrative. If enough people state the same thing without providing evidence and or support, does it become factual to those caught in the loop? National crisis. Q. Then Ron saying, we all know that Mike Pence has the complete authority to save the Republic on January 6th. If he takes decisive action as a leader on January 6th, then Vice President Pence will surely be the 2024 presidential frontrunner, and we will have a huge support to CAG in 2024, which is Keep America Great. The two analyses, one by Claude Alain Roten, I don't know how to say his name, sorry, and Lionel Pouzaz at Orf Analytics, a Swiss startup, the other by the French computational linguist Florian Caffiero and Jean-Baptiste Camp, built on long-established forms of forensic linguistics that can detect telltale variations, revealing the same hand in two texts. In writing the Federalist Papers, for example, James Madison favored whilst over while, and Alexander Hamilton tended to write upon instead of on. And people always go into it because of social media algorithms. Yeah, social media algorithms play definitely a huge part of it. And then, of course, like in our current day, like radicalization can easily happen due to these algorithms. Like on YouTube, there was a big problem with the alt-right pipeline. TikTok has a very similar problem on it as well. I'm happy that due to the January 6th insurrection, platforms have gotten more strict with that kind of stuff, which is good, because then those people get driven into niche platforms where they can't be around normies, because that's like the big thing for the alt-right and for conspiracy theorists or whatever. They want to be amongst the normies so they can spread those ideas. If they're just amongst themselves, the ideas won't spread. And then, you know, a big part of why people get into these kind of stuff is like a loss of community, a loss of a sense of purpose. People feel lonely, and these types of things usually give them a very strong sense of community because these people are very heavily into it, and they will, you know, love bomb them saying, oh, you're on the right path, you know. And then if you like, people start to doubt them, then the people in their group are like, no, these people just don't get it. They don't get it. They haven't woken up yet to the truth, but you have. You know, you're a special person, and you have, and they make them feel wanted. They make them feel like they have a community around them, all this kind of stuff, which, you know, let's say is capitalism alienates us from each other, etc., etc. Instead of relying on expert opinion, the computer scientists used a mathematical approach known as a stylometry. Practitioners say they have replaced the art of the old studies with a new form of science, yielding results that are measurable, consistent, and replicable. Sophisticated software broke down the Q text into patterns of 3 character sequences and tracked the recurrence of each possible combination. Their technique does not highlight memorable idiosyncratic word choices the way that earlier forensic linguists often did, but the advocates of stilometry note that they can quantify their software's error rate. The Swiss team said its accuracy rate was about 93%. The French team said its software correctly identified Mr. Watkins' writing in 99% of tests and Mr. Ferber's in 98%. Machine learning revealed that J.K. Rowling, the creator of Harry Potter, had written the 2013 mystery Cuckoo's Calling under another pen name. Oh. I was like, where's this going? I didn't know that. The FBI used a form of stilometry to show that Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber. In recent years, such techniques have helped detectives in the United States and Britain solve murder cases involving a forged suicide note and faked text messages. Damn. To be honest, it's kind of terrifying that this type of forensic tool exists. Kinda, yeah. The team studying Q got in touch with each other after the Swiss scientists released an earlier preliminary study showing that their writing had changed over time. Each team applied different techniques. The Swiss scientists used software to measure similarities in 3 character patterns across multiple text, while comparing the complexity of vocabulary and syntax. The French team used a form of artificial intelligence that learns the patterns of an author's writing in roughly the same way that facial recognition software learns human features. The team shared text examples, including more than 100,000 words by Q and at least 12,000 words by each of the 13 other writers they analyzed. Gerald McManaman of the University of Nevada, Reno, a renowned forensic linguist critical of the machine learning techniques, said he doubted that software could pick out the telltale individual variations from the quirks of the distinctive voice assumed in the Q messages, full of short sentences, cryptic statements, military jargon, and Socratic questions. Who dat? Q messages took over our lives, literally. That's Paul Ferber. Okay, that's him. To counter the danger that text spanning different forms or genres might confuse the software, the scientists said they compared other writing samples that were all of the same type, social media posts, primarily tweets. And the writing by Mr. Ferber and Mr. Watkins stood out over all the other similarities to Q's. David Hoover, an English professor at New York University and an expert in author identification, said the scientists seemed to effectively address the potential problem of Q's distinctive voice. He found the work quite persuasive, he said. I buy it, said Patrick Juola of Duquesne, how is that said? Duquesne University, a mathematician who identified J.K. Rowling as the author of Cuckoo's Calling. Quote, what's really powerful is the fact that both of the 2 independent analyses showed the same overall pattern, Dr. Juola added. Neither team ruled out the possibility that other writers had contributed to Q's thousands of messages, especially during what appears to have been a period of collaboration between Mr. Ferber and Mr. Watkins around late 2017. But the scientists relied on other facts to narrow the list of feasible writers to test. That evidence, the scientists said, increased their confidence that they had unmasked the main authors. Some QAnon followers had begun to suspect as early as mid-2018 that one or more of the commentators who first claimed to stumble onto the Q messages had actually written them. Without prior knowledge, how could anyone have plucked those almost nonsensical postings out of the online torrent? An NBC News report that summer identified Q's earliest poster as Mr. Ferber, known online as Baruch the Scribe, and 3 others. The report emphasized that the 3 others had possible financial motives for stoking the craze because they had solicited donations for Q research. Mr. Ferber did not. The Swiss team studied writings by those 4, as well as by Mr. Watkins and his father, who owns the message board. In addition to examining those 6 potential authors, the French scientists added 7 more to the mix. They tested tweets by another online Q booster close to the Watkinses, as well as by Mr. Trump, his wife, Melania, his son Eric, and 3 others close to the former president who had publicly encouraged QAnon: Michael T. Flynn, his one-time national security advisor, the political consultant Roger Stone, and Dan Scavino, a Trump White House deputy chief of staff. Damn. There he is. Quote, at first, most of the text is by Ferber, said Cafiero, who works at the French National Center for Scientific Research. Quote, but the signature of Ron Watkins increased during the first few months as Paul Ferber decreased, and then dropped completely. Mr. Ferber said in an interview that he had inherited his passion for American politics from his parents, who had taught in Canada and traveled around in the United States. He visited often while building a career in software development and writing for trade publications. His fascination with conspiracy theories, he said, began with questions about President John F. Kennedy's assassination. Then, around 1996, he found a site spinning alternative stories about the suicide of Vincent Foster, the Clinton White House consul, and other deaths falsely said to be linked to the Clintons. Quote, that sort of kicked off my interest, he said. The early Q messages, which scientists say resemble Mr. Ferber's writing, lay out the core QAnon myths and slogans that later messages repeat. That was also when Mr. Ferber and a few early promoters helped attract the interest of entrepreneurial YouTube creators who amplified the message. But at the start of 2018, both studies found the writing changed conspicuously. Where the 2017 posts were filled with Socratic questions, the later posts were more declarative and expository, with heavy use of exclamation points and words written in all capital letters. Sometimes, Q shared internet memes. The Q messages had recently jumped from an older message board to the one run by Ron Watkins and owned by his father Jim, the site known then as 8chan and now as 8kun. Jim Watkins, a former US Army helicopter repairman who had settled in the Philippines, also owned a pig and honey farms and dabbled in online pornography business. Around the 2016 election, he had created a conspiracy-minded pro-Trump website with his son overseeing the technical side. The evident change in writing style at the start of 2018 coincided with an unusual exchange between the Q account and Ron Watkins. After a period of confusion, whoever was writing as Q publicly asked Mr. Watkins to confirm that the messages were still coming from the original Q. Mr. Watkins immediately did, and then declared all future posts would appear exclusively on Mr. Watkins' platform. Mr. Ferber began complaining that Q had been hijacked and that Mr. Watkins was complicit. From then on, the scientists said the messages were very closely matched the writing of Ron Watkins alone. Quote, when QAnon started to be successful, one of them took control, said Mr. Rotten of Orf Analytics. In a podcast interview in 2020, Frederick Brennan, who started the message board that the Watkinses own now, asserted without proof that Q was the invention of Mr. Ferber. An HBO documentary released last year, Q, Into the Storm, built a case that Ron Watkins was behind the messages, and then Mr. Watkins briefly seemed to admit that he had written as Q. He then smiled, laughed, and resumed his denial. Jim Watkins is one of the most suspicious characters I've ever seen in anything. I have to watch that documentary. Q has now gone silent, without posting a message since December 2020. Mr. Ferber, in an interview, said he believed that QAnon was an operation that has run its course. He said he was still convinced that it was orchestrated by a true insider, quote, to awaken people to this massive secret war against the cabal, end quote, and that, quote, the next phase is coming, end quote. In an online memoir he posted about the QAnon movement, he writes wistfully about the early days before the hijacking. Q's messages, he says, seem to validate conspiracy theories he had subscribed to for years, tying the Clintons and George Soros to the Rothschilds and the Illuminati. Quote, like a child being taken from his father's workshop for the first time, Mr. Ferber writes, quote, we were being given a behind-the-scenes look into the ugly and corrupt world of geopolitics. And that is the article. But yes, so it seems that Mr. Watkins and Mr. Ferber were the two people behind the QAnon messages. So no high-level military official revealing the secrets behind the scene. Just two people crafting stories and falsehoods. There we have it, folks. Is it 100% proof? Of course not. No. But it's a very good sign. And there are many things now pointing towards these two people. Quite a strong case against them. And if you enjoyed this content of mine, then please do like and subscribe down there. That really helps me out a lot. The channel grows and, we're getting close to that 1,000, which is very, very exciting. And I stream these segments Monday, Wednesday, Friday on twitch.tv/funwithfondue at 6 p.m. Eastern European Standard Time. And you can see this chat over there. That one is from my stream. You should come there, hang out with us. We are great, fun folk. And now on the screen, you should see another video of mine that you should definitely check out for some good content of mine. I hope you have a good time and a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.